Welcome to Breaking Down Mental Health with Dr. Jones. In these educational videos, Dr. Jones will discuss mental health diagnosis, clinical supervision, using technology in counseling, multiculturalism, and many other topics to help you get a healthy understanding of why mental health is important. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button if you enjoy these videos.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. If you're a practicing counselor, maybe an educator, or even a trainee just starting out, the ground beneath our feet is shifting fast.
It really is.
And we're talking about the urgent, immediate challenge of artificial intelligence in clinical mental health care.
And that's exactly why we're doing this. This deep dive is really tailored for you, for the people on the ground. Our mission today is to, cut through all the tech hype.
Yeah, the jargon.
And give you the vocabulary, the actual empirical evidence, and a practical framework to evaluate these tools. Because, frankly, if they're used without that critical oversight, they risk harming the very clients we're supposed to protect.
Especially clients from culturally and linguistically diverse communities.
Exactly.
And we've pulled together a really powerful stack of sources for this. We're looking at professional standards from the APA, the NVCC, and also some brand new cutting-edge research.
And what that research shows, it's not a theoretical warning, it's not a what if, it's a map of current measurable clinical disparities.
So we're not debating if AI might have problems.
No, not at all. We are observing systems that right now, today, show systematic differences in how they respond based on a client's race, language, or even just their cultural communication style.
Okay.
And that's why the sources lean so heavily on this idea of a care ethics framework. It gives you a really simple mandate. First, attentiveness. You have to notice the impact.
Just to be looking for it.
And second, competence. You have to be equipped to critically evaluate what the AI gives you and, step in when it's wrong.
And I think that brings us to the core kind of disturbing insight that we need to hold on to here. AI is at its heart a mirror.
It's a mirror.
It's not inventing new biases. It's just encoding and really amplifying the social and historical biases that are already out there.
Already in our society and, even in our own mental health systems, we're just digitizing the problem.
So to fight this, we all need to be speaking the same language. Let's start with some key vocabulary. The first one is foundational, cultural responsiveness.
Right. So in a clinical sense, we all know this, it's your ability to see and effectively respond to the cultural context that shapes a client's life, their needs.
Sure.
But when you apply that to technology, it means you have to evaluate if that piece of tech, that app, that software, if it accommodates or if it actually undermines diverse ways of thinking and communicating.
And a term that connects right into that, especially for counselors in multilingual settings, is code switching.
Oh, this one is so often misunderstood.
It really is.
Code switching is simply alternating between two or more languages or dialects in a single conversation. It's not a deficit. It is not a sign of disorganized thought.
It's an adaptation, a skill.
It's a natural, adaptive, and completely culturally normative communication pattern for millions of people.
And if the technology fails to see that, if it penalizes that, we run straight into this concept the sources call epistemic inequality. This one feels really significant for our profession.
It's heavy because it's about power. Epistemic inequality is the systematic devaluation of knowledge that comes from, non-Western, indigenous, or community-based frameworks.
So a digital tool built on dominant Western psychological norms might see those other frameworks as, an error.
Exactly. So if your client talks about a healing practice from their tradition, or if their idea of well-being is more communal than individual, the AI, which is probably only trained on Western textbooks,
it might flag that as atypical or worse, pathologize it.
It could dismiss their entire reality. The tech risks basically institutionalizing this invisibility of other ways of healing.
Okay, so let's shift to the how. How do these errors actually happen? There are three distinct types of clinical bias we need to be able to spot.
Right, and they're different. The first is the one we hear about most, algorithmic bias.
This is the one, it's the system's fault.
It's the system's fault. The error is built into the code, into the design, because the data it learned from was biased. Your job as the clinician is to recognize its unfair outputs and mitigate them.
But the next two, these are on us, the human in the loop. The second one is automation bias.
And this is that cognitive trap. It's where we as clinicians just, uncritically trust what the AI spits out just because it came from a machine.
Even if it goes against our own gut feeling, our own clinical judgment.
Even if it contradicts the evidence right in front of your face, the APA was so direct about this, saying clinicians have to maintain final authority.
And the third one, which I think is the sneakiest for busy counselors, is automation complacency. How is that different from bias?
It's a great question. Automation bias is an active choice. You actively defer to the machine. Complacency is passive. It's a reduced vigilance. The system works perfectly 99 times. So on that 100th time, when there's a subtle, maybe culturally biased error, you just miss it.
Yeah, I'm looking for it anymore.
You're not scrutinizing, you're skimming, you're accepting. And that risk is just so much higher for clients from those underrepresented groups. They're the ones who will be that 100th error.
So let's move from the how to the what. The documented empirical facts. This isn't theory anymore.
No, this is measurable. We have to talk about the study on racial bias in large language models. These are the engines behind all the new transcription tools.
Right.
The researchers gave them psychiatric case vignettes, and the findings were, well, they were stark.
The LLMs proposed inferior quality treatment recommendations when the patient's race was mentioned.
Exactly. Inferior. Compared to when race wasn't mentioned at all, that is a direct, measurable clinical disparity generated by a machine.
And it was worse for certain disorders.
It was most pronounced in cases of schizophrenia and anxiety. And in some ADHD cases, the models just omitted standard medication recommendations when a patient's race was stated.
Wow.
But they included them when the patient was presented as white or racially ambiguous. I mean, that's not a documentation error. That is substandard racially biased care.
And if that's not concerning enough, there's the huge problem of linguistic bias.
Right. So this landmark research showed that automated speech recognition systems, ASR, have significantly higher error rates for African American English than for standard American English.
Which means any counselor using a tool that auto-transcribes their sessions.
Which is most of them now. You need to stop and think about this. It means the documentation for your linguistically diverse clients will have more errors, more misinterpretations.
It could break rapport, it could introduce factual mistakes into their chart.
And it fundamentally misrepresents the client's own story. It's not just a tech accuracy problem, it's a power problem. The failure systematically lands on already marginalized people.
So why does this keep happening?
It all circles back to the root cause, training data bias. If you underrepresent a group in the training data, you get biased outputs. It's that simple.
And the data sets used to train these things, they reflect the profession. And historically, our profession lacks diversity.
I mean, think about it. Historically, only about 4% of psychologists in the U.S. are Black. If your training data for an AI mirrors that kind of gap, the bias is inevitable.
And on top of that, a huge review of mental health chatbot research found something pretty damning.
It was damning. The vast majority of studies, they just lacked any formal fairness testing, no cultural validation. So the tools that you might be using right now were likely never even tested for bias against the very people most vulnerable to it.
Okay, let's ground this. Let's make it real. We need a clinical scenario that every counselor and educator can watch out for. We're calling it Jordan's experience.
Okay, so imagine a counselor, we'll call her Maya. She's working with her client, Jordan.
And Jordan code switches.
Yeah, frequently. Between English and Spanish. Totally normal adaptive communication. Maya uses an AI tool, Therapy Scribe, to help draft her session notes.
And she's reviewing the draft note. She sees something that makes her jaw drop.
Therapy Scribe has interpreted Jordan's code switching as disorganized speech.
And this isn't a hypothetical. Research has validated this is a common failure in these systems.
It is. Now, just stop and think about the harm from that one single output.
First, the record is corrupted. The clinical documentation now has a misrepresentation of Jordan's communication, labeling a cultural norm as pathology.
Right, and that record follows the client. It could taint how every future provider sees them.
Second, it changes the clinical focus. If Maya hadn't caught that, she might start thinking about thought disorders instead of Jordan's actual presenting problem.
And that echoes these awful historical patterns, like the overdiagnosis of schizophrenia in Black patients, which was often rooted in misinterpreting cultural behavior as a symptom of psychosis.
This brings the whole thing crashing right into our professional ethics. This isn't optional for counselors. It is a mandated competence boundary.
The ACA Code of Ethics is crystal clear. Standard E.5b says we have to recognize how culture affects the definition of a problem.
So if your AI misdefines the client's communication because of a cultural bias,
And you let that stand, You are crossing a serious competence boundary. You're using a tool beyond its limits, and you are undermining your client's welfare.
And for educators, for trainers.
The NVCC has made technology competence a core directive. Their new AI ethics principles from just this year state, and I'm quoting here, consideration must be given to multicultural issues to ensure unbiased and competent delivery of services. If you or your students are using a tool without knowing its cultural blind spots, you are professionally liable.
So given all this, what's the plan? What does a responsible counselor actually do? Feels like we have two roles here. Evaluator and advocate.
That's a great way to put it. Before you even sign up for a new AI tool, you have to become a critical investigator. There are key questions you have to ask vendors. These aren't just suggestions, this is your due diligence.
Okay, question one you have to ask is about training data and bias testing.
And you have to be specific, not just diverse populations. Which racial, ethnic, and linguistic groups were in your training data? And what were the documented results of your bias testing for each of those groups?
And if they can't answer that or they get defensive.
That tells you everything. Red flag.
Okay, second question. Linguistic inclusivity.
Right. Does your tool specifically accommodate code switching? Does it handle different dialects, different accents? Or was it only tested with standard American English speakers?
Third, and this one's huge for responsive design, community input.
Yes. Were people from the communities this tool is supposed to serve actually involved in designing and testing it? Because tools built in a vacuum, they always embed dominant cultural assumptions.
And the fourth question, transparency.
Can you, the counselor, explain how this AI works to your client so they can give truly informed consent? If it's just a black box that spits out an answer, you can't ethically use it for assessment.
Okay, so that's before you adopt. What about when you're already using a tool?
Then your job is active, critical vigilance. This is the antidote to automation complacency. You have to scrutinize the outputs for every client, but pay extra attention for clients from underrepresented groups.
And you have to trust your own knowledge.
This is where your training is everything. When the AI output conflicts with your understanding of what's culturally normal, like Jordan's code switching, your clinical judgment must prevail. You override the machine.
And you fix the record. You don't let those mischaracterizations stand.
Exactly. Correct the inaccurate output, document why you corrected it, and make sure the clinical record reflects your client, not the algorithm's mistake.
And what if you keep seeing the same bias over and over?
Then your advocacy role kicks in. You document it, you report it to the vendor, and if the harm continues, the principle of responsiveness demands that you put your client's welfare over convenience. And that might mean you have to find an alternative, even if the bias tool saves you time.
We've covered a huge amount of ground today, both technical and ethical, but the takeaway seems unmistakable.
It is.
For the modern counselor, cultural responsiveness and AI competence aren't separate things anymore. They are one integrated requirement.
And the documentation is so clear on this. Your clinical judgment, which is grounded in your multicultural expertise, that is the last and most important line of defense. The research just confirms what good counselors already know intuitively.
Right. When an AI mistakes cultural behavior for pathology, that's not an insight into your client.
It's an empirical error in the system. Full stop.
But the scale of this problem it's enormous. It's way beyond what any single counselor can fix in their own practice. So that leaves us with a final thought for you to take with you.
Since individual practitioners have such limited power to force these big industry-wide changes, what is our collective professional responsibility? For those of you in training, for practitioners, for educators, what is our responsibility to move beyond just being vigilant ourselves and to support collective advocacy, through the ACA or the NVCC, to establish mandated non-negotiable standards for fairness and cultural validation for all mental health technology?
That feels like the next deep dives we all have to take together.